He was 68, a quiet, thoughtful man. Name was Richard, father of 2, divorced after 28 years, retired early from a company he built with his own hands. He wasn't flashy, didn't talk about himself much, but that night, at a backyard cookout, he finally opened up. Just one story, one small win. He had started mentoring young guys at a local tool shed, helping them get back on their feet, teaching them tools, but also how to carry themselves like men. It made him feel alive again. Useful, needed. He shared that story with a genuine smile. The kind that sneaks up when something real clicks inside your chest. And across the table, his younger brother, Sam, smiled too. Said, "That's great, man." But didn't look him in the eye, didn't nod, didn't ask, "What's that been like for you?" He just glanced at his phone, scrolled, nodded at the screen, changed the subject. That night, Richard sat across from me, quiet, then said something I'll never forget. It was like the compliment bruised me. It didn't lift him. It landed flat. You see, that's how it starts, not with betrayal, not with anger, not with raised voices or slammed doors. It starts in the energy. The part of a man's soul that knows when something's off, even when the surface looks calm. Carl Jung had a word for this. The shadow. It's not the person. It's the unspoken part inside them. The resentment they don't talk about. The envy they pretend isn't there. The hidden weight behind a fake smile. The applause that comes 1 second too late. The joke that cuts a little too close. The warmth that's missing when they say, "I'm happy for you." You don't need to catch them doing something wrong, you just need to feel it. And if you're over 50, you already have. Because with age comes wisdom, but also something else, clarity. You stop second-guessing the feeling in your gut because now you know energy doesn't lie. And sometimes neither do pauses. Sign 1, sarcasm with a smile. It happened at the backyard cookout. The jokes started flying, light, playful. "You're so sensitive." "Relax, I'm just messing with you." You've heard it, more times than you can count. It sounds casual, playful even, but it doesn't land that way, not anymore, because deep down you know the difference between a joker and a jab. They bring up your past, that time you failed, that one thing you regret. They poke at your weight, your marriage, your job, your age, and they wrap it all in a laugh. Everyone else joins in. You do too. Because what else can you do? Call it out and you're too serious. Can't take a joke. Always looking for a problem, so you stay quiet. But later that night, sitting on the edge of that lawn chair long after the grill's cooled down, it hits you, like a whisper from your gut. That wasn't funny. That was a wound in disguise. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But most people, they don't want understanding, they want relief, so they dump their bitterness onto you. Dress it up as humor and call it love. It's not love, it's projection." And in my book, that kind of sarcasm isn't harmless. It's the most polite form of cruelty there is, especially when it comes from someone who claims to care. Sign 2. Subtle sabotage. It was just before the last backyard cookout. The invite had gone out. Richard assumed Sam had mentioned it. But when he asked, Sam blinked, shrugged, and said, "Oh man, I thought I told you." Or, "It must have slipped my mind." But it always slips in when it matters most. They give you advice, but it's the kind that leads you in circles. Leaves you doubting yourself, second-guessing your instincts, and they do it with a warm tone like they're doing you a favor. They call it protection, wisdom, just looking out. But every time they help, you lose ground. Your confidence dips. Your momentum fades. And here's the real truth. It's not their memory that's unreliable, it's their ability to handle your growth. Carl Jung said it clearly. When a man feels inferior, he may not rise. He may pull others down. That's what this is. They see you climbing and something inside them starts to ache. So they keep you small, not cruelly, just enough to hold you close. If someone is always near when you're low, but conveniently, distant when you shine. If they encourage doubt but never your dreams, then let's call it what it is. You're not being supported. You're being managed. And it's time to take your life back from the hands that are pretending to hold. It's steady. Sign 3, shadow competition. It was after the cookout. Richard casually mentioned, "I finally got promoted." Sam nodded, paused, then said, "Yeah, I just picked up a brand new truck." Richard wasn't trying to compete. He was just sharing. A moment, but just like that, it wasn't his moment anymore. The light shifted, the attention drifted, and the air got a little heavier. It's subtle, not loud, not rude. Just enough to remind you that your happiness makes them uneasy, because your growth shines a spotlight on the parts of them that haven't moved. You speak about your success. They pivot. You celebrate. They detour the conversation. They're not applauding. They're measuring. You didn't sign up for a contest, but they did. To them, your joy isn't a story to witness. It's a scoreboard they can't stop watching. And when someone constantly needs to outdo you, match your steps, or gently steal the attention away, you're not in a real friendship. You're in quiet competition. And over time, that silence wears on you, even when you're ahead. Because in that kind of game, nobody really wins. Sign 4. Surface support. They show up, like Sam did that day, but just in form, not in feeling. They say the right words. "Proud of you." "Wow, that's impressive." But it feels like someone reading from a script. No real warmth, no spark in the eyes. They respond because they should, not because they feel. Their tone is flat. Their presence, civil but remote. They don't ask questions, they don't lean in. They don't stay long in your happiness, just a nod, a polite smile. Then they fade. That's not presence, that's a performance. Genuine support is curious. It celebrates the details. It lingers. False support? It makes a quick stop, gives a quick word, and disappears before the moment has a chance to mean anything. You start picking up on it, that hollowness behind their encouragement, and you wonder, is something wrong with me? It's not you. It's your instincts finally speaking up. They're not walking beside you. They're just nearby. And sometimes that kind of distance feels lonelier than being alone. Sign 5. Controller's concern. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." That's what Sam told Richard at the last neighborhood gathering. Soft voice, concerned eyes, like he was trying to protect him. But what Richard felt didn't match the words. It settled like a collar. He had brought up an idea, something that genuinely lit him up. And just like that, Sam's face tensed, called it risky, said it was impulsive or kind of out of character. Richard was speaking from the heart, but Sam called it emotional. He followed his inner sense. Sam labeled it reckless, and bit by bit, almost without noticing, Richard began to second-guess his own sense of direction, not because he was off track, but because his path didn't match Sam's map. Carl Jung once said, "Those who can't master their chaos will try to master you." And that's exactly what this was. It wasn't guidance to help him think straight. It was subtle pressure, teaching him to shrink. They didn't want him growing. They wanted him steady, contained, predictable. They called it care. But it was control, wrapped in caution. Because the real fear wasn't that Richard might stumble. It was that he might soar, without needing anyone's permission. And that fear, that's the one they can't disguise. Sign 6. Gossip. In the shadows you step into the patio, and something changes. Laughter quiets. Eyes shift. That stillness you weren't meant to catch settles over the group. But you notice. You weren't in the conversation, but somehow you were the focus. And you know that sensation. It's not paranoia. It's familiarity. They won't bring it up directly. That takes guts. That takes truth. So instead they build stories in the background, not because those stories are accurate, but because they're easy to shape. They mold your image into what they need to believe. What they need others to believe. And here's the trickiest part. They pretend like nothing happened. They smile when you show up, shake your hand, call you brother, all while carrying pieces of your reputation in their pocket like keepsakes. Carl Jung said, "We disown what we cannot face in ourselves and cast it on others." So when someone whispers your name in rooms you're not in, it's not about you. It's about what they haven't faced. You did nothing wrong. You just became the mirror, and what they saw in you was everything they were avoiding in themselves. And mirrors. They only scare people who aren't ready to look. Sign 7. Emotional starvation. They don't ask how you're really doing anymore, not sincerely. They don't lean in, they don't follow up. They don't light up when you talk. They're still around. Holidays, birthdays, a quick message here and there. But the connection? It's gone. You can sense it. Like reaching for a hug through a window. They're physically there, but emotionally. Somewhere far off, something inside them has pulled back, quieted. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your growth got too loud for their stillness. Your progress became a mirror, reflecting what they never started, never pursued, never became, and over time, just being near you began to cost them more than it gave. So now they nod, but they don't ask. They smile, but the smile doesn't touch their eyes. They say, "Good for you." But it lands like, "That should have been mine." You're not imagining it. You're not self-centered for missing the closeness. You're just yearning for something genuine. And when you've gone too long without emotional nourishment, even silence starts to feel like a weight, because what used to be affection is now just distance dressed as familiarity. Sign 8. The pause before applause. This one's easy to overlook. Most men miss it, because it's so subtle, so quiet. It slides by unnoticed. You share good news, a new role, a big step, a fresh beginning, and for just a breath they freeze, a tiny pause. Their face tightens for a beat, their eyes flick, their shoulders draw back. Then comes the smile. "That's awesome, man." Maybe even a laugh or a pat on the shoulder. But you already felt it, in that split second of hesitation. That was the shadow. It didn't scream, it didn't glare, it simply stalled, because celebration that takes a second to arrive isn't real celebration. Here's the truth. Words can lie, smiles can cover. But timing tells all. If they always need a moment to catch up and to process your joy, to throw on the applause like it's a jacket, then that cheer, it's not for you. It's for show, and what they're really proud. Fake is their ability to cover it up. A few autumns ago, I sat across from a woman named Elise in a small cafe in Santa Fe, late October. The air had that crisp, thinking kind of stillness. She was in her 70s, twice divorced, lived alone by her own choice, silver rings on every finger, and a gaze that didn't flinch. We weren't talking about anything deep, just life. Getting older, looking back. But she caught me zoning out, mind tangled in something unspoken. She stirred her tea and looked at me with that calm strength, then said, "You're thinking about someone who smiled, but didn't mean it." I nodded. She leaned in and said something that stuck like truth in my bones. People's smiles tell you who they want to be seen as. But their silence, that's who they really are. That hit hard because by your 50s or 60s, you've been there, haven't you? You've felt the awkward hugs, noticed the hesitation in their applause, heard the praise in their voice, but saw the grief in their eyes. And it's time we say it plainly. You're not bitter, you're not imagining things. You're finally listening. You're hearing what the silence has been trying to tell you for years. Because as you grow older, you start rejecting the fake stuff. You get allergic to empty praise, to hollow hugs, to congratulations that sound more like, "Why not me?" The truth, not everyone deserves a front row seat in your life. Not everyone who calls you brother shows up when it's real. So here's what you do. Tighten your circle, sharpen your awareness, and move forward with no apologies, because real love lifts. But shadow love only feels safe when you play small. So rise anyway. And if this cracked something open in you, drop a comment and say, "I won't be the home of anyone else's shadow." Say it out loud, then live it, because your light, it was never meant to dim, just to make someone else comfortable, and now you finally know that.